A single gunshot shattered the peaceful evening air of Sweetwater, Texas, in 1875. But it wasn't the gunshot that caught Austin Reid's attention, it was the laughter that followed. Pure, unrestrained, and completely inappropriate for a shootout, that laughter floated across the dusty Main Street like a melody no one had taught him. Austin's hand hovered over his Colt revolver as he stepped off the boardwalk, squinting through the golden haze of sunset to find its source. Violet Kincaid couldn't help herself. Perhaps it was the absurdity of watching the town drunk, old Pete, fire his pistol at his own reflection in the saloon window, or perhaps it was the month of grief finally breaking within her like a fever. Either way, she stood there on the porch of her late father's general store, one hand pressed to her stomach, the other covering her mouth as peals of laughter escaped between her fingers. "Miss, are you quite all right?" Austin approached cautiously, his spurs jingling with each step. He was trail-worn and weary, just arrived from a 3-month cattle drive to Kansas. His dark hair was too long, his beard unkempt, but his blue eyes were sharp and concerned beneath the shadow of his Stetson. Violet's laughter subsided only enough for her to gasp. He shot his own hat off. Before dissolving into giggles again, pointing at old Pete, who was now staring bewilderedly at his fallen hat with a smoking gun in hand. Austin couldn't help the smile that tugged at his lips. "That's old Pete for you, though most folks don't find shootings quite so amusing in these parts." "I know it's not proper," Violet managed, wiping tears from her eyes. "But after burying my father last month and spending every day since sorting through his affairs, I believe I was due for some hysteria." Her laughter ebbed, leaving behind a smile that transformed her entire face, full lips, high cheekbones, and eyes the color of summer sage. Austin removed his hat, revealing the stark line where sun-darkened skin met the protected paleness of his forehead. "My condolences, Miss Kincaid." "Violet Kincaid," she replied, her composure returning though her eyes still sparkled with mirth. "Kincaid's general store was my father's." "Austin Reid," he offered with a slight bow of his head, "just back from Abilene with the Circle B outfit." Violet assessed him openly, taking in his worn chaps, trail dust, and the way he stood slightly favoring his right leg. "You look like you could use a hot meal, Mr. Reid." "I was heading to the saloon for just that purpose, Miss Kincaid. Their stew tastes like saddle leather," she said bluntly. "I've just made chicken and dumplings that would put that slop to shame." Austin blinked, surprised by her forthright manner. "Are you inviting me to dinner, Miss Kincaid? We've only just met." "Yes, and already you've seen me in an unladylike fit of laughter over a town drunk's misfortune," she countered. "Besides, my father always said a cowboy fresh off the trail brings the best stories, and I could use a good story tonight." The invitation was improper by any standard of society, but there was something in her eyes, a mix of loneliness and defiance that Austin recognized all too well. He'd seen it in his own reflection often enough. "I'd be honored," he said finally, "though I should warn you, 3 months on the trail doesn't improve a man's table manners." This brought another laugh from Violet, softer this time. "I've 6 brothers, Mr. Reid. I doubt you could shock me." As they walked toward the living quarters behind the general store, Sheriff Miller nodded to them from across the street, where he was escorting old Pete to sober up in the jail. "Your brothers," Austin said, falling into step beside her. "Are they here in Sweetwater?" "Scattered to the winds," Violet replied, a shadow passing over her features. "2 in California seeking gold, 1 ranching in Wyoming, another working the railroads, and the twins joined the army 3 years back. None could make it back for the funeral." She spoke matter-of-factly, but Austin detected the hurt beneath her words. "And they left you to manage everything alone." "They offered to come, but I told them not to," she said, lifting her chin. "What's done is done. Father's buried, and telegrams travel faster than men on horseback. Besides, the store needs tending." Austin nodded, understanding the practicality that frontier life demanded. "Still, it's a heavy burden for one person." I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Reid, Violet said, unlocking the back door to the store. Though I'll admit, sometimes I wonder what I'm holding it all together for. The living quarters were modest but comfortable, a small parlor with a kitchen area, 2 doors presumably leading to bedrooms. Everything was neat and organized, with shelves of books lining one wall and hand-stitched quilts adding warmth to the simple furnishings. Please, sit. Violet gestured to the table as she moved to the stove where a pot simmered. I hope you don't mind if I dispense with formality. It's been a while since I've had company. Formality was never my strong suit, Austin admitted, removing his gun belt and hanging it on a peg by the door before settling at the table. His body ached from weeks in the saddle, and the simple wooden chair felt like luxury. Violet served generous bowls of chicken and dumplings, the steam carrying the scent of herbs and home cooking. There's coffee too, if you'd like, though it's been on the stove a while. I've drunk worse, Austin said with a smile, watching as she poured them each a cup. Thank you for this, Miss Kincaid. It's been a long time since I've had a home-cooked meal. Call me Violet, please, she said, sitting across from him, and you're welcome. Now you promised me stories. As they ate, Austin told her about the cattle drive the stampede during a lightning storm, the river crossing that nearly drowned 2 hands, the endless days of dust and drudgery punctuated by moments of terror and beauty. Violet listened intently, asking questions that revealed an intelligence and curiosity about the world beyond Sweetwater. You've never left Texas? Austin asked, surprised. Never had cause to, Violet replied, though a wistful note entered her voice. Father needed help with the store, and someone had to keep the home fires burning while my brothers chased their fortunes. And what about your fortune, Violet? What would you chase if you could? She paused, considering. I suppose I'd like to see the ocean someday, read about it in books, but… She shrugged. Dreams don't pay the bills. No, Austin agreed, but they keep a person going when there's nothing else. Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted in the air between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. What about you? Violet asked, breaking the moment. Where do you call home, Austin Reid? Nowhere in particular, he answered honestly. Been drifting since the war, signed on with different outfits, followed the herds north each spring. That sounds lonely, Violet observed. It can be, Austin admitted. But there's freedom in it too. No one depending on you, no responsibilities beyond the day's work. No one to come home to, Violet added softly. Austin studied her face in the lamplight, the strength in her jawline, the flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. Some might see that as a blessing. Some haven't spent weeks talking to themselves and an empty store, she countered with a wry smile. Austin laughed, a rusty sound even to his own ears. Fair point. After dinner, Violet refused his offer to help with the dishes. You look dead on your feet, she said. Where are you staying in town? Austin hesitated. Hadn't gotten that far in my planning. The livery stable usually lets hands bed down for a small fee, Violet frowned. Nonsense. The spare room is made up my brother Andrew's old room. You're welcome to it for the night. That's very generous, but it wouldn't be proper, Mr. Reid, Violet interrupted, hands on her hips. I've already scandalized half the town by inviting you to dinner. Might as well be hanged for a sheep as a lamb. Austin couldn't argue with her logic, and the prospect of a real bed instead of hay was too tempting to refuse. Just for tonight, then, and I insist on paying. We'll discuss that tomorrow, Violet said with finality. The washroom is through there if you'd like to clean up. There should be hot water in the reservoir. Later, cleaned up and wearing a borrowed nightshirt that had belonged to one of Violet's brothers, Austin lay in a proper bed for the first time in months. He could hear Violet moving about in the next room, the familiar domestic sounds both comforting and disquieting. It had been so long since he'd been this close to normal life that it felt almost foreign. As he drifted towards sleep, Austin found himself thinking about Violet's laughter, how it had cut through the haze of his trail, weary mind like a bell ringing clear on a foggy morning. He wondered what it would take to make her laugh like that again. Morning came with the scent of coffee and bacon. Austin dressed quickly in his trail clothes, now somewhat fresher after being brushed clean. He found Violet in the kitchen, already dressed in a simple blue calico dress, her auburn hair pinned up neatly. "Good morning," she greeted him. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in months," Austin admitted. "Thank you." They ate breakfast together, falling into an easy conversation that surprised Austin with its comfort. When Violet mentioned needing to open the store, he offered to help bring in a delivery waiting at the freight office. "You don't have to do that," Violet protested. "I'm sure you have your own business to attend to." "Nothing that can't wait," Austin said. "Besides, I owe you for the hospitality." The truth was, Austin had no pressing business. The trail boss had paid the hands their wages, and most were spending theirs at the saloon or the brothel on the edge of town. Austin had planned to do the same, but somehow the prospect had lost its appeal. As they walked to the freight office, several townspeople nodded greetings to Violet, though Austin noticed the curious and sometimes disapproving glances cast their way. "Seems I'm damaging your reputation," he murmured. "My reputation has weathered worse," Violet replied with a shrug. "This town has been waiting for me to fail or fall apart since Father died. They can wait a bit longer." Her resilience impressed him. "You're not what I expected to find in Sweetwater." "And what did you expect, Mr. Reid?" "Certainly not a woman who laughs at gunfire and invites strange cowboys to dinner." This earned him another of her laughs, though softer than the previous day's outburst. "Life's too short for propriety at all times, don't you think?" At the freight office, they discovered the delivery was larger than anticipated 5 crates of merchandise from St. Louis. The freight manager, a portly man named Simmons, cast a dubious look at Violet. "Miss Kincaid, these are mighty heavy. Perhaps you should consider selling the store. I know Mr. Hargrove at the bank has mentioned some interested parties." Austin noticed the way Violet's spine stiffened. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Simmons, but I'm managing just fine. Mr. Reid has kindly offered to help with the delivery." "Has he now?" Simmons raised his eyebrows. "Well, ain't that neighborly?" Austin stepped forward, deliberately crowding the man. "The crates, Mr. Simmons." With a mumbled apology, Simmons directed them to the loading dock where the crates waited. Between the two of them, Austin and Violet managed to load them onto a handcart borrowed from the freight office. "Hargrove's been pressuring you to sell?" Austin asked as they made their way back to the store. Violet nodded, her face set in determined lines. "Since the day after the funeral. Seems he thinks a woman can't run a business on her own." "And what do you think?" "I think," Violet said, pushing the cart with surprising strength, "that Mr. Hargrove can go jump in the creek. This store has been in my family for 15 years. I grew up in it. I know every item, every account, every customer's preferences." "Sounds like you've got things well in hand," Austin observed. "I do," Violet agreed, then sighed. "Except for the accounts. Father was never one for keeping proper books, and I'm trying to make sense of it all. Some customers haven't paid their tabs in months." "That would be a problem," Austin said thoughtfully. "Have you considered hiring help?" "Can't afford it," Violet admitted. "Not until I sort out what's owed and collect on some accounts." They reached the store, and Austin helped her unpack the crates, carrying merchandise to shelves as directed. The work was pleasant, and he found himself enjoying the simple tasks and Violet's company. At midday, when Violet closed the store briefly for lunch, Austin made a decision. "I could help you with the accounts," he offered. "I kept books for a ranch in the Panhandle for a while. I'm good with figures." Violet looked surprised. "You do that?" "Why?" Austin shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable under her direct gaze. "I've got time before I need to sign on with another outfit, and you've been kind to me." "It would be a tremendous help," Violet said slowly, "but I can't pay much." "Room and board would be fair," Austin suggested, then hastily added, "I could sleep in the storeroom if that's more proper." Violet studied him for a long moment. "No need for that. Andrew's room is going to waste, but people will talk, you know." "Let them," Austin said with more confidence than he felt. "It's a business arrangement." And so it began. Austin moved his few possessions into Andrew's room and set to work on the store's ledgers. The task was more complex than he'd anticipated. Samuel Kincaid had indeed been haphazard with his bookkeeping, with entries scattered across multiple books and scraps of paper. In the evenings after the store closed, Austin and Violet would sit at the kitchen table with the books spread before them, piecing together the puzzle of the store's finances. Some nights they worked in companionable silence, other nights they talked, sharing stories of their lives. Austin learned that Violet had been engaged once, to a young man who'd gone off to fight for the Confederacy and never returned. He told her about his own war experience, fighting with a Texas cavalry unit, and the emptiness he'd felt upon returning to a home that no longer existed, his family having moved north during the conflict. "Is that why you started drifting?" Violet asked one evening, a week into their arrangement. Austin nodded, his pencil pausing over a column of figures. "Nothing to tie me down anymore. Seemed easier to keep moving." "And has it been?" "Easier," he considered the question seriously. "In some ways, no attachments means no disappointments. Also no joy," Violet pointed out gently. Austin looked up, meeting her gaze across the table. "I wouldn't say that." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Violet cleared her throat and returned to the ledger before her. "I've found 3 more accounts that are seriously overdue. The Wilsons, the Parkers, and Mr. Jenkins at the blacksmith shop. I'll pay them a visit tomorrow," Austin said, grateful for the return to business. "Sometimes people need a reminder from someone they don't know to settle their debts. Just be diplomatic," Violet cautioned. "We still need their business," Austin smiled. "I can be charming when required." "I've noticed," Violet murmured, not looking up from her work. The next day, Austin made his rounds to the delinquent account holders. He approached each with respect but firmness, explaining that Miss Kincaid was updating the store's books and would appreciate settling of outstanding debts. To his satisfaction, 2 of the 3 paid at least part of what they owed, with promises to clear the rest by month's end. As weeks passed, Austin and Violet fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings were spent in the store, with Austin helping customers, stocking shelves, and making deliveries to elderly patrons who couldn't make the trip into town. Afternoons often found him collecting on accounts or negotiating with wholesalers for better prices. Evenings were for bookkeeping and conversation. The townspeople gradually adjusted to Austin's presence, though whispers persisted. Sheriff Miller made a point of stopping by the store one afternoon when Austin was alone. "Reid," he said, his weathered face unreadable. "Got a minute?" "Yes, sir," Austin replied, setting aside the inventory list he'd been working on. "Known Violet since she was knee-high to a grasshopper," Miller said without preamble. "Her daddy was a good friend. He built a fine business," Austin said cautiously. "That he did." Miller studied Austin with sharp eyes. "Folks are wondering about your intentions." Austin met the sheriff's gaze steadily. "I'm helping with the books and the store. Miss Kincaid needed assistance." "Uh-huh," Miller nodded slowly. "And when you've finished with the books, when the next trail drive comes looking for hands?" It was a question Austin had been avoiding himself. "I haven't decided yet." "Well," Miller said, settling his hat more firmly on his head, "just be sure you do right by her. Violet's had enough disappointment for one lifetime." After the sheriff left, Austin stood motionless behind the counter, Miller's words echoing in his mind. What were his intentions? He'd been in Sweetwater nearly a month now, longer than he'd stayed anywhere in years. The thought of leaving brought an unexpected tightness to his chest. That evening, as they worked on the books, Austin found it hard to concentrate. Violet noticed his distraction. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "You've been staring at the same page for 10 minutes." Austin set down his pencil. "Sheriff Miller paid me a visit today, wanted to know my intentions." Violet's cheeks colored slightly. "I'm sorry about that." The sheriff has appointed himself my guardian since father died. It's understandable, Austin said. He cares about you. And what did you tell him? Violet asked, her voice carefully neutral. Austin hesitated. That I hadn't decided yet, about when I'll move on. Something flickered in Violet's eyes, disappointment perhaps. I see. The thing is, Austin continued, the words difficult to find, I'm not sure I want to move on, at least not yet. Violet looked up sharply. What are you saying, Austin? I'm saying I like it here. Working in the store, helping with the books, being... He trailed off, uncertain how to express what he felt. Being what? Violet prompted softly. Being with you, he admitted finally. I like being with you, Violet. The silence that followed seemed endless. Violet's expression was unreadable, and Austin felt his heart hammering against his ribs. I like having you here, she said at last. More than I probably should. Relief washed over Austin. So I can stay, continue our arrangement, Violet nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. The books still need work, and the store runs better with 2 pairs of hands. Then it's settled, Austin said, returning to his ledger with renewed focus, though his mind was far from the columns of numbers before him. The next day brought unexpected trouble. Austin was helping a customer select fabric when the door opened, and a well-dressed man entered, accompanied by 2 rough-looking companions. Austin recognized him immediately from Violet's description, Edward Hargrove, the banker. Miss Kincaid, Hargrove called, ignoring the customer Violet was serving. I need a word. Violet's smile became fixed. I'll be with you shortly, Mr. Hargrove. I'm attending to Mrs. Peterson at the moment. Hargrove's face darkened. This is a matter of some urgency. Austin stepped forward. The lady said she'll be with you shortly. Hargrove turned, seeming to notice Austin for the first time. And you are, Austin Reid. I help Miss Kincaid with the store. Ah, yes, the drifter she's taken in. Hargrove's tone made the words an insult. Tell me, Mr. Reid, are you aware that this establishment is operating under considerable debt? Violet finished with Mrs. Peterson and moved to confront Hargrove. My accounts with the bank are current, Mr. Hargrove. If you've come to discuss business, we can do so privately. I'm afraid that's no longer possible, Hargrove said smoothly. Your father took out a second mortgage on this property 6 months ago. The payment was due last week. Violet paled. That's impossible. I've gone through all his papers, not all apparently. Hargrove produced a document from his coat pocket. The amount is $200, Miss Kincaid. Do immediately, or I'll be forced to begin foreclosure proceedings. Austin felt his blood boil at the smug satisfaction on Hargrove's face. May I see that document? He asked, extending his hand. Hargrove hesitated, then passed it over with obvious reluctance. Austin examined it carefully, noting the date, terms, and signatures. Samuel Kincaid's signature looked genuine, but something about the document nagged at him. We need time to verify this, Austin said. There's nothing to verify, Hargrove snapped. Either pay the debt or prepare to vacate the premises by the end of the month. And if we pay? Violet asked, her voice steadier than Austin would have expected given the circumstances. Then you may continue operating until the next payment comes due in 3 months. Hargrove's smile was cold. Though I doubt you'll manage it given your limited resources. After Hargrove and his men left, Violet sank onto a stool behind the counter, the document clutched in her trembling hands. $200, she whispered. I don't have that kind of money, Austin, not even close. Austin pulled up another stool beside her. How much do we have in the cash box? Maybe $40, Violet said, rubbing her temples. The rest goes to wholesalers and expenses. And the outstanding accounts, another 50 or 60 if we could collect it all today, which we can't. Austin took the mortgage document from her gently. Something doesn't feel right about this. Your father never mentioned a second mortgage. Violet shook her head. Never, and why would he? The store was doing well enough. I think we need to talk to someone who would know, maybe your father's friends or his lawyer if he had one. Violet's eyes widened. Judge Abernathy. He handled all father's legal matters. He's in Austin now, but I could telegraph him. Do it, Austin urged. And in the meantime, I'll see what else I can find out about Hargrove. Over the next few days, Austin and Violet worked feverishly to gather information and funds. Judge Abernathy's reply to Violet's telegraph was concerning. He had no knowledge of a second mortgage and requested to see the document himself. Unfortunately, he couldn't return to Sweetwater for at least 2 weeks. Austin, meanwhile, made discreet inquiries around town and discovered that Hargrove had been trying to acquire several properties along the main street, including the general store's location. The rumor was that the railroad was planning a spur line to Sweetwater, which would dramatically increase property values. "He's trying to swindle you," Austin told Violet as they sat at the kitchen table one evening, 10 days after Hargrove's visit. "I'm almost certain of it." "But the mortgage looks legitimate," Violet argued. "Father's signature could have been forged or added to a different document," Austin suggested. "Without the judge here to confirm, we can't be sure. And in the meantime, we need $200 we don't have." Violet dropped her head into her hands. "I can't lose the store, Austin. It's all I have left." Austin reached across the table, taking one of her hands in his. "You won't lose it, I promise." Violet looked up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "How can you promise that?" Austin squeezed her hand. "Because I have an idea. It's risky, but it might work." The next morning, Austin rode out to the Circle B ranch where he'd worked the previous season. The foreman, Bill Cooper, was surprised to see him. "Reid, thought you'd moved on." Austin dismounted, shaking the man's hand. "Not exactly. I've been helping out at Kincaid's general store in town." Cooper raised an eyebrow. "Heard something about that. Also heard the Kincaid girls having trouble with Hargrove at the bank." "News travels fast," Austin commented. "That's actually why I'm here. I need to ask a favor." Inside the foreman's cabin, Austin explained the situation and his plan. Cooper listened thoughtfully, puffing on his pipe. "It's a gamble," he said when Austin finished. "If you're wrong about Hargrove—" "I'm not," Austin insisted. "Everything points to him trying to acquire properties ahead of the railroad announcement." Cooper nodded slowly. "The boss has been hearing the same rumors. That's why we're increasing the herd this year, more beef to ship once the spur comes through." "So you'll help?" Austin asked. $200 is a lot of money, Reid. "I know. But I've got 70 saved from the last drive. I'm asking for a loan of 130 against my wages for the next drive." Cooper studied him. "You're planning to sign on for the spring drive then?" Austin hesitated. "I haven't decided yet." Cooper tapped his pipe against his boot. "Seems to me you have decided something, investing in a store and all." "It's not an investment," Austin protested. "It's helping a friend." "A friend," Cooper repeated, his expression knowing. "Must be some friend to risk everything for." Austin couldn't argue with that. In the weeks he'd known Violet, she'd become more important to him than he cared to admit, even to himself. "I'll do it," Cooper said finally. "But not as a loan against future wages. The boss has been meaning to stock the ranch store better anyway. I'll give you a letter of credit for merchandise feed, tools, dry goods. You fill the order and we'll call it square." Relief flooded through Austin. "That's more than fair. Thank you, Bill." Cooper waved off his thanks. "Just make sure you're right about Hargrove and Reid. Figure out what you really want. A man can't ride the trail forever." Austin returned to Sweetwater with the letter of credit safely tucked in his pocket. When he explained his plan to Violet, she threw her arms around him in an impulsive hug. "You're amazing," she exclaimed, then stepped back, blushing at her own boldness. "But will it be enough? Hargrove specifically demanded cash." "He demanded payment," Austin corrected. "A letter of credit from the Circle B is as good as gold in these parts. If he refuses it, we'll have proof he's not interested in being repaid, only in taking the store." The day of reckoning arrived with Hargrove punctually appearing at the store at noon, his 2 companions in tow. The store was unusually full, something Austin had arranged by spreading word that Miss Kincaid would be offering special discounts that day. "Well, Miss Kincaid?" Hargrove looked around at the crowded store with distaste. Do you have my payment? Violet stepped forward, Austin at her side. I have payment for the mortgage, yes, she said clearly, her voice carrying through the store. Mr. Reid has secured a letter of credit from the Circle B ranch for the full amount. Austin handed over the document. Hargrove scanned it, his face darkening. This is unacceptable. The terms require cash payment. The terms require payment, Austin countered. A letter of credit is a legally binding form of payment, as I'm sure a banker like yourself knows. Murmurs spread through the store as customers watched the confrontation with interest. I insist on cash, Hargrove said, his voice rising. Otherwise, I'll begin foreclosure proceedings immediately. That's your right, came a new voice from the doorway. Judge Abernathy, a tall man with silver hair and piercing eyes, entered the store. Though I'd be interested to know how Samuel Kincaid signed a mortgage on March 15th, when he was in my office in Austin on that very day, signing his will. A hush fell over the store. Hargrove's face went pale. There must be some mistake. The only mistake, Judge Abernathy said coldly, was thinking you could forge a document and not be discovered. I have the record of Samuel Kincaid's visit in my logbook, witnessed by my clerk and another client. Hargrove backed toward the door but found his way blocked by Sheriff Miller and two deputies. Edward Hargrove, the sheriff said formally, you're under arrest for attempted fraud and forgery. As Hargrove and his men were led away, the store erupted in excited conversation. Violet turned to Austin, her eyes wide with disbelief. How did the judge know to come today? I thought he couldn't make it for another week. Austin grinned. I sent him another telegraph after visiting the Circle B, explaining our plan and the deadline. Guess he decided it was worth making the trip. Judge Abernathy approached them, shaking Austin's hand warmly. Quick-thinking young man, Hargrove's been suspected of shady dealings for some time, but we've never had proof until now. Will the charges stick? Violet asked anxiously. With my testimony and the forged document as evidence? Absolutely, the judge assured her. Your store is safe, my dear. After the excitement died down and the last customer had left, Violet closed the store early. She turned to Austin, who was straightening merchandise that had been disturbed during the commotion. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. Austin set down the tin of coffee he was holding. You don't need to thank me. I was just keeping my promise. No one's ever fought for me like that before, Violet said, moving closer to him. No one's ever cared enough. Austin's heart raced as she stood before him, close enough that he could smell the lavender in her hair. I care, he said simply, more than I expected to. Violet smiled up at him, and there was something new in her expression, a warmth, a certainty. I was so afraid you'd leave once this was resolved, that you'd go back to the trail. I've been thinking about that, Austin admitted, about what I want. And what do you want, Austin Reid? He took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I want to stay in one place. I want to wake up in the same bed, work the same job, see the same person, every day. Violet's eyes glistened with tears, but her smile widened. That sounds an awful lot like putting down roots. It does, doesn't it? Austin reached out hesitantly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The thing is, Violet, I never had a reason to before, nothing to come home to. And now, she whispered. Now I have you, he said, the words coming straight from his heart. Your laughter, your strength, your kindness. You gave me something to come home to. Violet laughed then, a joyful sound that reminded him of that first evening when he'd found her on the porch. She laughed until tears spilled down her cheeks, and Austin found himself laughing too, caught up in her happiness. What's so funny? He asked finally. Us, she replied, wiping her eyes. All this time, I thought I was just holding things together, waiting for something to happen or someone to help. And then you walked into my life because I couldn't stop laughing at old Pete shooting his hat off. Austin pulled her into his arms, still chuckling. Fate works in mysterious ways. Indeed it does, Violet agreed, her laughter subsiding as she looked up at him. So what happens now, Cowboy? Now, Austin said, his voice softening as he lowered his head toward hers, I think I'll kiss the girl who wouldn't stop laughing." Their lips met in a gentle kiss that deepened as Violet's arms wound around his neck. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily, and Austin rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you, Violet Kincaid," he murmured. "I think I have been since that first day." "Good," Violet replied, her fingers tangling in his hair. "Because I'm already in love with you, Austin Reid." 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Austin stood behind the counter of Kincaid and Reid's general store, updating the inventory ledger. The bell above the door jingled, and he looked up to see Sheriff Miller enter. "Afternoon, Sheriff," Austin greeted him. "What can I help you with today?" "Just dropping by to see how the newlyweds are faring," Miller said with a smile, his eyes moving to the new sign above the counter that listed both Austin and Violet's names as proprietors. "Couldn't be better," Austin replied honestly. "Business is booming with the railroad crews in town, and Violet's idea to add a lunch counter is bringing in folks from all over the county." "Speaking of your bride, where is she?" Miller asked, selecting a bag of hard candies from a display. "Making deliveries," Austin said, ringing up the purchase. "She insisted she needed the fresh air." Miller nodded approvingly. "You two have turned this place around. Samuel would be proud." "That means a lot," Austin said. "We're trying to build something that will last." As if summoned by their conversation, the door opened again and Violet entered, her cheeks flushed from the cool air and her eyes bright with excitement. "Austin, Sheriff Miller," she called, hurrying toward them. "You'll never believe what just happened." Austin came around the counter, concerned by her breathlessness. "What is it? Are you all right?" Violet nodded, laughing that wonderful, uninhibited laugh that had captured his heart. "More than all right. I just spoke with Dr. Matthews, and he confirmed it we're going to have a baby." Joy surged through Austin, so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. He swept Violet into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed even harder. "A baby," he repeated in wonder when he set her down. "When? Spring," Violet replied, her hands cradling her still flat stomach. "Just in time for the wildflowers." Sheriff Miller cleared his throat, reminding them of his presence. "Congratulations, both of you," he said, his weathered face creased in a genuine smile. "This calls for a celebration. First round at the saloon is on me. Read when you can tear yourself away." After the sheriff left, Austin pulled Violet close again, overwhelmed by the turn his life had taken in less than a year. From a lonely drifter to a husband, business owner, and now a father-to-be. "Are you happy?" Violet asked, searching his face. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Austin answered truthfully. "When I rode into Sweetwater, I was just looking for a hot meal and a place to sleep before moving on. I never expected to find a home. And all because I couldn't stop laughing at the wrong moment," Violet reminded him, her eyes dancing with mirth. Austin kissed her forehead tenderly. "Thank God for inappropriate laughter. And stubborn cowboys who keep their promises," Violet added, rising on tiptoe to kiss him properly. As winter gave way to spring, Violet's belly grew round with their child. The store prospered, and Austin found himself fully embracing his new life. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving wildflowers into the headboard in honor of the season their baby would be born. On a perfect May morning, after a night of labor that tested both their strengths, their daughter came into the world with a lusty cry that quickly turned to something like laughter. They named her Joy, for the emotion that had brought them together and continued to fill their days. 5 years later, Austin stood on the porch of their expanded home behind the store, watching as Violet chased their daughter and 3-year-old son, Andrew, through the wildflowers that bloomed in their garden. Joy's laughter, so like her mother's, floated through the air, mingling with Violet's and little Andrew's to create a melody more beautiful than any Austin had ever heard. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Violet gathered the children and herded them toward the house. Catching sight of Austin watching them, she smiled that same bright, unfettered smile that had first caught his attention. "What are you thinking about standing there so serious?" she asked, coming up the steps with Andrew in her arms and Joy skipping ahead into the house. Austin pulled her close, mindful of the sleepy boy between them. "Just thinking about how lucky I am, how one moment one laugh changed everything." Violet's eyes softened with understanding. "You know, sometimes I think about what would have happened if old Pete hadn't shot his hat off that day, or if you hadn't been walking by just then." "I'd have kept drifting," Austin said with certainty. "Looking for something I couldn't name and would never have found. And I'd have kept the store running, doing my duty, missing out on all this joy," Violet added, leaning her head against his shoulder. Austin pressed a kiss to her hair, breathing in the scent of lavender that still lingered there. "Thank you," he murmured. "For what?" Violet asked, looking up at him. "For laughing when you should have been serious. For taking in a trail-worn cowboy. For giving me something to come home to." Violet's laughter bubbled up again, soft and sweet in the gathering dusk. "Always," she promised, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Always." As they went inside together, closing the door on the outside world, Austin knew with absolute certainty that he had found the place where he belonged. Not just a physical location, but a space in the world where his heart was full, his purpose clear, and his future secure in the love of the woman who had taught him how to laugh again and in doing so, had taught him how to live.